Our second theme is about HR trends. It's not a secret that historically the perceptions that both people in the organization and HR practitioners itself often had of HR haven't always been that great. I remember last year there was a LinkedIn post that showed 5 emoticons that popped up most when people typed in HR in, I believe it was Google. And they weren't very smiley emoticons. But things go beyond emoticons and perceptions. According to a report by Sage, 73% of HR leaders and 76% of C-suite leaders believe that their HR team focuses primarily on processes, and 63% of C-suite leaders still see HR's role as administrative. The good news is that in 2024, HR will turn this around. One of the HR trends identified for next year by the Academy to Innovate HR is called HR Leans In, meaning that HR will rediscover its identity and lean into the strategic conversation. Leaning in also means that HR shouldn't be apologetic about taking time to focus on its own priorities and develop the profession with the same rigor and investment as we devote to other departments. And leaning in also requires us to change the language we speak in HR and about HR. So in 2024, we'll stop saying, I'm in HR because I want to help people. HR is there to drive business results, and by driving these results, it has the opportunity to help employees. Now, all of this brings me to our next statement. In 2024, HR finally starts to lean in. Daniela, I will start with you this time. What do you vote?
So I agree to a certain time, to a certain degree, that we have seen that HR has done a tremendous evolution and seen as a strategic partner to the business over the last year. I'm not sure if this will all happen finally in 2024. I'd love to, but there I'm a little bit skeptical. So it may take longer, as we know, changes, over many years and decades sometimes happen. But as an HR professional, naturally, I want it to happen rather sooner than later.
All right. So I will take this one as a yes, but then. Dieter, what do you vote on this one?
I also have a yes, but. So definitely for all the reasons that Daniela has mentioned, it's the yes side of things. There's a caveat for me, though, is I think the first one is there's been a bit of a narrative in HR that strategic is better than operational. And I think that's not true. I think they are different in nature. So when we talk about HR leaning in, I think HR needs to lean in within the environment and the context within which it finds itself. Yes, there is a strategic contribution. Yes, there is an operational contribution. But I think leaning in for me also just means that this narrative around that operational is bad, transactional is bad. Let's be honest for a moment, a lot of HR work still lives in that domain and will continue to be there for a period of time. So the strategic side is not better. The strategic side is different. Is it important? Most definitely. And then the other points that you've raised, really around the fact that I think the environment is right for HR to really claim a different type of space and a different type of conversation. And I'm not talking about the seat around the executive table. I think that has been solved for quite a period of time. I know not in all organizations, but in general, I think that space has been claimed. I think it's a lot more now around what do we do with that space? Because it's great you sit around the boardroom table, but what is that contribution going to be? And that's why my yes, but comes in. I think there's things we need to solve for to really make this a powerful, meaningful statement for 2024 and beyond. And I think there's some enablers that need to come to the fore. I think there's operating model changes we need to think about longer term. I think there's different skill sets that we need to think about longer term. So that's where my yes, but comes from. I would love to say a wholehearted yes, but I think there's a couple of things to solve for.
Yes. I think that you both would love to give a wholehearted yes here. But something that I wanted to ask both of you as well, though, I guess, first of all, do you agree with the fact that even people in HR for a long time, and maybe some still do actually, have this perception of HR that is not necessarily super positive, or maybe it doesn't even, maybe it's a perception more that doesn't do justice to the role that we have in HR. So is there not a part where as HR practitioners we should start believing more in ourselves, and we should start valuing the work that we do also maybe a bit more? Is there not a bit of that here as well? So Daniela, what do you think?
Well, I have been very lucky that throughout my career with the professionals or the teams I have been working, they are truly passionate about what they are doing and, how much innovation they can drive and how much impact they can have. I fear that the resentments or the skeptical point of views usually comes from outside HR. And maybe we need to understand what has historically happened. HR was nothing else than, payrolling people, so paying everybody's salary and then also securing that we recruit talent. Nowadays, it is so much broader, the spectrum of what HR should deliver and what actually can also, where HR can deliver an impact to the organization. Historically, HR is seen as somebody, doesn't need to have a certain degree, doesn't need to have certain experience. It can be just done next to everything else. Even in medium-sized company, the person who issues the employment contract is sometimes, the assisting team of the managing directors. So, and it's seen not as somebody, who really delivers a strategic impact or even challenges certain kind of decision, But of course, for the future, I hope that this very much changes. I see a big appreciation of HR professionals also when it comes to change topics. So we know that change is everywhere in an organization. HR people usually, they have a good understanding and a sensation about, what change does to employees and how actually we need to prep them, how we need to take them along a change journey. HR people are usually also very good in communicating, keeping everyone informed and making sure that, conversations are facilitated or even conflicts are spoken about. And I see there's driving a lot of value into the organization. Then, and give also the word to Dieter in a bit, certainly when it comes to HR analytics, dashboards or numbers, I've seen more and more this becomes crucial to the HR function, and it gives them the right numbers and facts to the board or to decision makers of what is really the organization about when it comes to employee turnover or participation rates, the rate of satisfaction, and so forth and so forth.
Thank you. Dieter?
So I think, a couple of things for me there. I think the first realization is what HR is today and what HR was in the past is not the same thing. And I think we haven't done a great job at educating a lot of the general audience around expecting something different or seeing something different. Because in my experience, where people have seen good HR, if I may label it like that, just for this conversation, they will never go back to expecting anything less, and they can see the value and they can see the impact. I do believe, though, that there is still work to be done. And I think, Daniela, you've hit the nail on the head there around very often people stumble their way into HR, from a career point of view. And then it's not necessarily, that much based on what everything that the profession can offer and what it is supposed to do, because you sit with a very different skill set and it is just something that has become a stretch of your current role and of your current job. So I think for HR really to lean in, I think there's work we need to do firstly about helping people understand what modern contemporary HR looks like and what we do and what is actually the disciplines that sit underneath, because I think most people still only think, very limited with regards to that. I think the second component we do need to think about is for today and for the future is how do we reposition what an HR career looks like and why people choose a career in HR, because I think there is still, to Daniela's point, there's a little bit of a perception, I go, into HR because I couldn't go into XYZ, or as opposed to I choose it for the following reasons. And those reasons need to be very much aligned to your point that you were making. It's about the contribution that you make to individuals, organizations, society going forward. But what's a realistic preview of what a HR career will look like? So I think those things need to shift, they need to change. I think HR, as much as we help the organization through change, we are notoriously bad at changing ourselves. So I think there's a little bit of deep soul searching work we also need to do around the courage and the self-belief about what we really bring to the table. And I think we are in an era where we don't need to back down because our value is actually very clearly articulated in various ways. You are not and apologies if this is a little bit offensive term, but you're not a second-class citizen in an organization purely because you are not, frontline revenue generating. You play a much bigger role in the bigger organizational ecosystem, and you don't need to stand back and, kind of be apologetic about that. And I think when we talk about HR leaning in, for me, it's being able to lean into just authorizing ourselves in those components. But there are things we need to fix. The career piece, the education piece, showing people something different. And I don't mean when I say something different to rebrand as, another name for, whether that's HR or HC or, people and culture. That's not what I mean. I think it's to actually give people a new experience of what the people function does for them in their organization. So I think that's, the direction that I hope we go in.
Yeah, when I hear you talk like that, it almost makes me think that, we need to, we as HR, we need a bit of a rebranding, and not indeed in terms of the name, because whether it's people and culture or that not in that regard, or, we need to become better at our own PR or something to be, so that people also get a better understanding indeed of what we actually do and the value that we bring in HR. I think I have a final question, and that is, perhaps also for those people who are listening or watching and who are in HR, how can each and every one of us just do their own tiny part in that and contribute to that? Do you have any ideas on that? And I'll start with you, perhaps, Dieter, since you just finished with the previous one.
I think there's a couple of things. I think HR is sometimes a thankless profession, right? So I think there's very often that a lot of your effort is not necessarily seen or recognized in a lot of environments. So I think a starting point there is to do a little bit of, I don't want to say soul searching, but just around what do you find valuable out of what you actually do and what you contribute. And I think that's a good self-reflection exercise to do because people are in HR for a very specific reason. I think based on that, you've mentioned this earlier, is just to start changing the language a little bit about how we talk about HR and how we position HR and how we talk about ourselves as HR professionals. I've got a lot of colleagues, and I say this with a lot of love and respect. When somebody asks them, what do? They say, oh yeah, I work in the people function somewhere. They don't want to say HR because then somebody's going to send them a CV. I'm exaggerating. But I think there is a responsibility we as HR professionals need to have to change the language, the narrative, the positioning, so that we can reinstill this pride in the profession that's sometimes a little bit missing. So I think those are small little steps individuals can take, while some of the bigger things that will take, to Daniela's earlier point, longer to move and to shift. I believe you change a culture by changing a conversation. And I think we have to change that language as a starting point about why am I doing this? What am I proud about? And what is almost that elevator speech for HR that I can stand up and say, but these are actually the things we do really well. You don't have to be everything to everybody, but make sure that the focus where you want to deliver impact, you are very clear about what that is and you can articulate it. And maybe that's just an easy starting point that each one of us can do.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, every single one of us can always take a responsibility where we can, right? So I think that could indeed be a very good start. And also something that you made me think of, Dieter, here is that words really matter. So the way we speak about what we are doing matters a lot. And that can definitely, I think, create a bit of a positive snowball effect if we change that language in a positive way. Thank you. Daniela, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yes, thank you. I would also like to highlight that HR should really evolve what kind of delivery it brings, what kind of topics it can really add to the business. And I believe, technology, so HR should be not afraid to leverage new technologies. There's a lot about AI and artificial intelligence that can be hugely helpful for the organization and could, implement it in the HR department. But also when it comes to dashboards and to analytics or KPIs. So HR should be feeling comfortable to first of all gather and then also report numbers, because this is seen as a really helpful conversation with many of the leaders, with many of the managing directors or boards, because then it becomes measurable. And my big recommendation is that everyone in HR should be, aware about that and should be really making an effort to deliver on those two topics.
Thank you. Okay, well, unless Dieter, you have anything to add or any final words?
I think final words potentially is just that we need to also acknowledge that it is a fantastic time to be in HR at the moment. And the reason I say that is there's been some significant changes that we've kind of highlighted, during the course of this conversation already in the profession, and we can expect a lot more. So I think we shouldn't stand back and, whenever we talk about what's not working, negate the fact that there is a lot that is going really well and a lot that there's a lot of history that we've kind of come from already. And I think we need to celebrate that, a little bit more. I think the conversations we're having today is very different than, 20, 25 years ago. And that's something just to be proud about and to also acknowledge, as we start shifting and moving forward. It's an and conversation. It's not that, things are broken. And I think that's an important point.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful last words. Daniela, do you have any final words?
I couldn't agree more with Dieter. I think he absolutely spoke from my heart. So I fully agree. It's very important that we celebrate the achievements and also that, we invite any of the smart and capable talent to come into an HR organization, because there's a lot to drive in the future. And it would for any individual a huge opportunity to be part of an exciting journey.
Also very, very beautifully said. Thank you very much. And thank you both of you for being here today and for having these debates. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for hosting us.
And thank you everybody for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did enjoy the conversation. And I will see you very soon again for a new episode of HR Debatable. Bye.